They hate.
They hate.
They hate.
They hate.
They hate because they fear.
They hate because they fear.
Because they fear.
Because they fear.
And they fear because they feel that the deepest feelings of their lives
They're being assaulted and outraged. They do not know why.
They are powerless pawns.
Powerless pawns.
They are powerless pawns
in a blind play of social forces.
Richard Wright.
From Mauhaus Productions, A Blind Play of Social Forces, Episode 1, Platypus.
I had been stuck in a remedial biology class the summer after my freshman year of high school. My mother had wanted me to take an extra class over the summer, but she accidentally enrolled me in this one. When I had complained, she told me she didn't know what the difference was. Shannon showed up for class on the third day. I only knew her because my friend Arnie liked her and because of her breasts, which were more pronounced than other girls in our grade. When she walked into class that June, her face was popping with acne and she had splotchy skin on her legs. She glared at me, and I went back to reading from my work packet, Science USA. We continued like this, two strangers brought together by typical circumstances, actively avoiding one another. Then something fell out of Shannon's pocket, and everything changed. I'd heard the clink, clink, clink of a hard object hitting the floor, and bouncing as I turned my head to see what it was. The shiny white ball, about the size of a jawbreaker, landed on the top of my shoe. I reflexively picked it up, but almost dropped it when I saw that it wasn't a ball, but a glass eye. Immediately, Shannon was standing over me.
Give it to me, homo!
I'd been called that by a handful of boys, and I knew if I was hearing it, I was about to be tormented. Just as quickly as I had picked up the eye, I handed it up to Shannon. I saw my friend Arnie that week and told him about Shannon's glass eye.
So?
But I thought you liked her.
Arnie told me that his older brother Paul said he'd heard Shannon was really a dude.
That's just dumb. And besides, she's developed.
She stuffs. And nobody but grandmother says developed.
I think she's cool.
Get a hobby.
I did. My hobby became stalking Shannon, waiting for just the right moment when I could ask her about the eye. Stairwells, sidewalks, water fountains. I trailed her like a detective. One day as she was coming out of the bathroom, she pushed me against the wall and asked,
"What the hell do you want?"
I was so stunned, I just said,
"I want to see the eyeball."
Her eyes softened.
Why? I don't know. I don't have it here. I left it at home.
I think sometimes about myself back then, how terrified I was of other people, of girls specifically. And Shannon wasn't just a girl. She was tall, but not bird-like. She was tough, but not a bully. She had a voice like Kathleen Turner, and she was only 15. Maybe I saw how vulnerable she was. Saw something in her that I'd only seen in myself.
Can I come over to your house? Maybe.
I pictured her room. Motley Crue posters and a corkboard with ticket stubs and photos of Johnny Depp and Keanu Reeves. She'd put the eye on her vanity next to that vanilla perfume she wore. There it would sit, waiting for me. When I went to my bike at the end of class, I found Shannon's address written on a page torn from the biology textbook and taped to my handlebars. I rode straight there. Shannon lived in one of only 2 houses on her street that hadn't been bulldozed for this strip mall they started construction on, but never finished. As I sat on my bike on the sidewalk out front, Shannon walked up from behind me and thumped my ear hard.
Don't get too jealous, homo.
She ran up the driveway. Her room was plain. No posters, no ticket stubs, no Keanu. Just yellowing walls and a beige comforter. Shannon picked up the eye off her dresser and tossed it to me like it was an ordinary ball.
You really like it, don't you? I don't know.
I didn't know if I liked it. But I knew I needed it, just like I would grow to need Shannon even when I didn't want to need her.
You want it?
Yes.
Too bad.
She took it from my hand, and when she did, her fingernails tickled my palm. I thought then about what Arnie's older brother had said, the absurdity of his claim, and I was just angry enough with her for snatching the eye. I blurted out,
Arnie said his brother said you're a guy.
Arnie sniffs his fingers. Now piss off.
I didn't move, not sure how to translate her command.
Door, driveway, bike, home.
She pointed out the door like my mom did when she wanted the dog to go out to the bathroom. Summer school ended. I got my second biology credit, and I spent July riding my bike around town with Arnie, finding excuses to drive by Shannon's house. I showed Arnie where Shannon lived, and he said he already knew that. I told him I had been in her bedroom all by myself.
I dare you to go look in her window.
That's dumb.
Because you're a pussy.
He pursed his lips to do his pussy call, which was just repeating the word quickly like calling a cat.
Pussy, 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 pussy.
You do it then.
I immediately regretted this challenge. Arnie was off his bike and sprinting towards the house. When I tried to follow, my shoelace got caught in the chain of my bike, and I was tasting blood and gravel in seconds. I sat at the end of her driveway, not knowing whether to untangle my lace or wipe my face or spit. I checked my teeth with my tongue, sore but seemingly not loose. As I gently brushed at my face, I heard Arnie yelling,
Go!
When I looked up, he was standing over me.
Go! Get up! Go!
I gotta get the gravel.
But Arnie picked up his bike and ran with it until he had enough momentum to jump up and pedal away. I saw Shannon out of my peripheral vision. I looked to her for answers, but she just stared at me. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt with some band I had never heard of. It came all the way down to her knees. Even from 100 or so feet away, I could see her spotty red skin.
What happened?
She held up her middle finger and then turned to go back inside. I freed myself and went to find Arnie. His bike was parked outside the Circle K. He was sitting on the curb with a giant icy.
I saw it.
What?
It's thing. I went, to the window and someone was in there, like movement. The curtains were see-through. It was naked. I told you. I
couldn't see this as anything more than a lie fueled by jealousy.
You didn't see anything.
I took his icy. When Arnie didn't protest or try to convince me further, I knew he was telling the truth. Or he thought he was. The rest of the summer I avoided Shannon's street. I avoided Arnie, too. If I didn't see either of them, I could create my own truth. Arnie saw what he wanted to see. Shannon was upset because we were peeping Toms. When school started back, I was hoping that they had both just forgotten about what happened. The whole school was packed into the auditorium for an opening day assembly about making school count. The speaker came in on a unicycle. He was dressed like Elvis. Sitting by myself in the front corner, I scanned the crowd. From across the auditorium, Shannon was staring at me. I didn't see her again all day, but when I went to my locker, I found a note inside. Instead of going home, I followed the directions on the note.
Come to my house. Come alone. We need to talk.
I played out different scenarios as I rode. She'd call Arnie a liar. She'd beat me up. She'd introduce me to her twin brother who has a defect and doesn't go outside. She met me at her door and led me back to her room. There was the glass eye, perched on a notebook on her dresser, as if it were watching over Shannon's room. With Shannon watching me, I went over to the eye and picked it up. She snatched it from me immediately and pushed me back so I sat on her bed.
Is it true?
I asked as if we had been in the middle of a conversation and I'd already told her what Arnie said.
It's almost true.
Shannon stared into the eye. I let her words fill the room, bounce off the posters, the corkboard, the broken mirror. I was expecting her to laugh along, to tell me she really did have a brother, to call Arnie a lying piece of shit. I picked the tiny white pills off her bedspread, rolling them into a ball in my palm.
Did you hear me?
When I looked up, her face had changed. Her jaw had a sharper angle. Her nose was thicker, shoulders more broad.
I heard you.
I wish I hadn't. Then I asked her a question she had surely been asking herself for years.
What are you?
What are you?
I remember being so insulted by her question as I told her.
I'm a boy.
I'm not.
It was true. Arnie's brother had known it, and Arnie saw it. Maybe everyone else at school already knew, and I was the only one left out. When I was 5 or 6, my parents had gone on vacation alone and had left me with my aunt and uncle and my cousin Valerie. I don't remember the specifics of the situation, but at some point I told her my penis hurt. She had responded quickly and excitedly. Mine does too. Valerie didn't know what a penis was, didn't know she was built differently than I, but Arnie had said Shannon had one, and she was telling me what he had said was true. Whether to prove my knowledge of anatomy or to correct Shannon's obvious misunderstanding, I said,
Girls don't have penises.
Some do. Besides, I'm not a girl either.
I have to go.
I couldn't move. I fixed my eyes on the giant eyeball in her hand in the same way I had to stare at a landmark to keep myself from getting seasick. My mother had taught me to count my breaths, so that's what I did. I focused on the individual splotches of color in the iris and counted. I was up to 56 when Shannon asked,
You ever seen a platypus?
No.
But you know what one is.
I nodded.
What is a platypus?
The ridiculousness of her question gave me the strength to look at her. I still couldn't talk to her.
I mean, is it a bird? Is it a beaver? When I was little, I thought they were beavers wearing duck costumes. Maybe I'd seen it in a cartoon. You know, the beaver wants to fit in with the duck, so it puts on a bill and some webbed feet. It's not a costume, though. I had these wildlife cards that come in a green box, and they describe the animals.
I smiled reflexively. I had had those cards, too, just the sample set. But one of them was the platypus.
I'm a platypus. And if you tell anyone else, I'll cut your dick off. You can go now.
She handed me the eyeball back. I wasn't at all sure that she wasn't playing a prank on me, but I secured the eye into the tiny pocket on my jeans, and I left. Once home, I dropped the eye into a velour bag that once held Dungeons & Dragons dice. I held it in my hand as I slept, caressing the soft skin of the bag around the eye. I would wake up several times a night and make sure the eye was still there. Sometimes I pulled it out, imagining as I looked into that black pupil, I was eye to eye with Shannon. Shannon and I didn't even acknowledge one another during the day. I felt guilty. But when Shannon and I met up in the afternoon, she said,
I hope you don't mind if I ignore you at school.
I was hurt by the idea coming from her.
Okay.
You're the only one who knows.
Arnie knows.
Arnie doesn't know shit.
He knows you're a guy. Or his brother does.
That's why I have to ignore you at school.
Because you're a guy?
Because you think I am.
Despite Arnie's insistence, Shannon was not what she seemed. His cruel rumor never took hold. Maybe if he had been popular. I forced myself to stop noticing her at school altogether. When her name came up, she was just that weird girl with the pizza face and the big boobs. As the eye lay hidden in plain sight on my nightstand, so too did Shannon disappear into the clutter. At night, though, both became my treasure jewels. I'd worked up the courage to ask Shannon for her phone number, to which she replied,
You like me? Gross.
When I called her, we talked about school stuff for a few minutes, about movies we wanted to see. There were questions I wanted answered, but my lips tightened around my teeth and wouldn't let them out. Soon we were silent. I listened for her breathing to make sure she was there, and I nestled the phone into my pillow so I could lie down and still hear her. Each night we stayed on the phone until one of us finally passed out or my mom picked up. After my second lecture on tying up the phone line, I braved an even worse punishment by sneaking out. When I couldn't, Shannon did. She said to me one night as we sat on my floor rolling the eye back and forth,
I still need to tell you something, and you're not going to believe me.
That's pretty much impossible, but go ahead, try me.
The eye. It's a communication device. My mom sent it to me. I'm not from Earth.
That's definitely true.
You know why I told you? Because of this.
She held the eye in her hand like she was weighing it. The pupil and iris were staring off at a diorama of the solar system I had made a couple of years earlier.
My mom said...
Your skin is clearing up.
I was falling in love with her.
You sound like my dad.
Until that moment, I had never talked to Shannon about her dad. He was never around when I was there, and Shannon never said anything like, "My dad will be home soon," or "My dad's bringing home pizza." He was a non-entity. Without my permission, my mouth shot out.
Does your dad...
No!
How?
She shrugged and said she had to go. The next night in the seclusion of her bedroom, Shannon explained she didn't even know her dad until she was 10. He didn't know she existed. One of those stories of the one-night stand followed by the 9-month stand.
It's not like that my mom didn't want a boy and forced me to dress like a girl. She told me I refused to be a boy. I screamed at my first haircut, ignored the trucks and trains she brought me, freaked out over princesses, all that stuff that's so stereotypical. When I could talk, I told my mom I was a girl. I was already named Shannon after my mom's great uncle.
Shannon talked. I listened. I felt like an interviewer sitting down with a celebrity. Shannon's mom gave in. At first, maybe to humor her, she thought. When she enrolled Shannon in kindergarten, she told the school the birth certificate was wrong. They didn't question the woman standing there with a 5-year-old who was obviously a little girl.
My mom had kept her life a secret from me. I didn't know about the drugs or the other stuff. She must have known something was going to happen because she took me to meet my dad about a week before she left. You didn't live here yet, but her disappearance was kind of a big deal.
Arnie had told me Shannon's mom had been shot, but I hadn't believed him. His gesticulating and melodramatic voice made the whole story seem like a movie. When Shannon moved in with her dad, he didn't know what she was. She said he was so terrified of having a little girl, he treated her like she had a disease he didn't want to catch. My mom was always barging into the bathroom when I was naked. I couldn't imagine keeping something like that from her.
What would happen if your dad found out?
He won't.
Shannon played some Native American ceremony music she had gotten from the thrift store. We lay back on our bed, looking at nothing in particular. Then we were looking at each other. I brought my hand to her face, her skin warming my cold and trembling hand. She did the same, and my tense jaw softened. I shifted and the eye escaped from my pocket. I moved my hand to grab it, but Shannon was faster. She was on her knees and holding the eye while I tried to get my balance on her bed.
Sucker.
That's when I kissed her. The force of me moving towards her knocked her back onto the bed, and I fell onto her. I could feel the eyeball pressing into the back of my head as she held me tightly. I dug my fingers between her back and mattress. If the universe would have allowed, I would have pulled her into me. She said she had heard a noise, but whatever the reason, Shannon brought the eyeball down onto the back of my skull with a thwack. Dazed, I rolled over. I don't know who started laughing first, but once we started, we couldn't stop. The infectious giggles passing back and forth until I fell asleep. I woke up that morning to Shannon's erection stretching her underwear to the ceiling. I didn't just want to touch her penis. I wanted to hold it, to take the piece of her that in my mind kept her from being a girl and wrap my fingers around it. I'd go back to sleep and Shannon would think it all an accident. In my mind, I was reaching out, fingers inching closer. But in reality, I lay as still as I could, captivated by the bulge.
I tell you to take a picture, but...
No.
We both sat up, Shannon more slowly than I, and she asked,
You want to see it?
She locked her door and ordered me to stand at the foot of her bed.
No touching.
She pulled her underwear down. She was not like me. My penis had a rounded head and a collar like a turtleneck. Shannon's turtleneck had been unrolled and made her penis look like an echidna. Her blonde pubic hair looked lopsided, as if she had started to cut it off but stopped. My gaze was broken when Shannon dug into her clump of hair to scratch it. I swallowed, but my throat was so dry I coughed.
Your turn.
My hands immediately went to my crotch to protect it. We hadn't heard the car pull up or the front door shut, but we both heard the "Hey!" coming from down the hall. Shannon pushed me into a chair and grabbed the first piece of clothing she could before slipping on an oversized t-shirt and rushing to unlock the door. At the very second the lock clicked, Shannon's dad pushed his way in. Shannon called later to tell me that her dad wasn't mad, but that I should stay away for a little while. Before she hung up, she added,
"Is it embarrassing for you that your dick is smaller than a platypus's?"
Despite her physical gender and despite her platypus rhetoric, I could only see Shannon as a girl. Even when she wore jeans, even when she spoke in her puberty-stricken voice, even when I saw her naked.
Eddie Philpott has bigger boobs than you do.
The army brat kid? Yeah, he's fat.
Why do you stuff your bra?
I wanted her to see that even she thought of herself as a girl.
Do you shave your face?
Do you? Look, just because you feel inadequate about yourself doesn't mean you need to try to make me feel the same way.
I knew she felt inadequate, though. If she was proud of who she was, she would tell other people she was a platypus. She'd take the tissue out of her unnecessary bra, she'd let me love her. Until I saw her standing at Shannon's locker touching her fingers, Deirdre Kelleher had been invisible to me. Afterwards, I saw her everywhere. That skater boy haircut with a stringy rat tail, her mismatched Converse, her jean jacket with a malformed skull bleached into the back.
We're just friends.
Since when?
Since... I don't know. Quit being so precious.
I didn't know what she meant by that. She should have said jealous, because that's what I was. To the rest of the world, Shannon and I were strangers, linked only by a boy who didn't even go to the school with us anymore. Arnie's parents had decided boarding school was the best fit. 2 girls touching fingers in a crowded hall, and I was the only witness to this catastrophe. There they were in the cafeteria, sniffing each other's milk and making faces. Deirdre saying something hilarious and Shannon lighting up the way she was only supposed to with me. Deirdre showing Shannon the L and R she had sharpied onto the rubber toes of her shoes, and Shannon acting like this was the cleverest idea anyone had come up with. Shannon tugging on Deirdre's rat tail, and Deirdre pulling on Shannon's hair to show her. This is what you would look like if you were a lesbo like me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see them together. So one night, well after 1 a.m., I walked to Shannon's house and watched her sleep, picturing myself curled under her arm, and even the imagined sensation of her erection pressing into me excited me. I was, I'm sure, completely silent, a ghost, but the din of my rushing adrenaline must have woken her up. She didn't startle. Instead, she calmly walked over and opened the window.
Hi.
Does Deirdre know?
When moved to kiss her, a compulsion driven by jealousy, she backed away.
What do you want, Joey?
I couldn't remember her even saying my name aloud, not once. Hearing her say Joey was like I had never heard my own name spoken. Joey, a word I didn't understand, spoken by a foreign doppelganger of someone I thought I knew.
I want the eye back.
Shannon looked over to her dresser at the round object that seemed to emit its own light. Then she looked back to me.
It isn't yours. Go home.
So many times during the day, I could have spoken to Shannon, just said hello even, waved at her, cornered her under the stairs and felt her lips against mine, but I didn't. Even when I watched her hugging Deirdre, even when she cut her hair short, even when they walked down the hall holding hands, even when someone wrote Dyke on her locker. Arnie could never convince people Shannon was a boy, but Deirdre had transformed her into a lesbian within 2 months. There were kids at our school whom everyone assumed were gay. Boys who had lisps or flitted their hands, girls who played softball. People said things behind their backs, made seemingly innocuous jokes. As long as a kid didn't rub it in your face, as long as there was still a chance you were wrong. Shannon had been mine. She had stayed hidden until I wanted to see her. She was my secret keeper, and I was hers. Now she was with Deirdre, and her secret was even more hidden than before. Too many nights I lay in bed fully dressed, ready to sneak out to see Shannon. Too many nights I imagined her with Deirdre. Imagined that moment of revelation, the initial shock, the questions, and the inevitable conclusion that they fit together perfectly. Shannon ignored the taunting at school, but Deirdre lashed out at her tormentors. She cursed and punched and threatened worse. In line in the cafeteria, this guy tried to show off by standing behind Shannon and ordering. In his best husky voice, he said,
I'll have a tuna fish, please.
You wish.
Deirdre punched him in the ear. One week when Deirdre was suspended, I worked up the courage to talk to Shannon at school. Our gym class was playing dodgeball, and we were among a crowd of weaklings and weirdos watching from the bleachers. We talked about Arnie away at school and about how we were halfway through high school. We talked about videos we had seen on MTV, about how the last season of Saturday Night Live was way better than this one.
I miss you.
She touched my knee. That night, Shannon showed up in my house.
I brought Hot Pockets.
She breezed by me up to my room. After her explanation of how the walking time from her house to mine was the exact amount of time needed to cool the core of a Hot Pocket, she went right into talking about Deirdre. She was trying to be cute at first, showing me the marker tattoo she drew on her forearm, the double S that mimicked a Nazi emblem. When I showed her I wasn't impressed, she said,
She understands me.
I understand you.
Not like she does.
Why? Because she's a dyke?
Her laugh came out like a coughing fit.
Shut up.
Like she was choking on a punchline I had fed her.
Shut up. Shut the fuck up.
She let me cry for a bit before she put her hand on my back.
I just couldn't believe you used that word. And then you got so mad. I brought you something.
She handed me an envelope she had pulled out of her back pocket. Inside was a folded drawing of the eyeball.
You drew this?
I knew Shannon even less than I thought.
Deirdre did.
I dropped the drawing. My tears were returning.
She understands what it means to be different, to feel like you're trapped in a Halloween costume, and it's one that's way more boring than who you really are. And she's not afraid to walk down the hall with me.
Her comment wasn't fair, and I told her as much.
You're the one who made that rule.
I did it to protect you.
I wanted to tell her I was ready to walk down the hall with her, that I didn't care what other people thought, that I loved her for who she was. What I said was,
Then why don't you tell her you're a boy and see what she says?
To you, I'll always be a boy. A boy pretending to be a girl.
What are you?
I told you. I'm a platypus.
Deirdre's first ever words to me were,
We need your help.
She said we, but she meant Shannon, and I hated her. On the way to Shannon's house, Deirdre told me Shannon's dad walked in on them while they were having sex. He had seen what Shannon had been able to hide from him for years. He had shouted at the naked boy to get off his daughter, and then he saw the naked boy was his daughter.
He kept saying, "That bitch! That lying bitch!" over and over as he hit her. He called her an abomination and told her to get out. Then he left.
Shannon was in her bedroom, a suitcase open on her bed. Her face was swollen, but not as badly as I had imagined. She was folding all of her clothes neatly before packing them.
Shannon.
A flattened stack of underwear.
Shannon.
Her oversized sleep shirt.
Shannon.
Those pants that showed too much if you knew what you were looking at.
Shannon.
Shannon.
She ignored us, and Deirdre had to say her name 6 or 7 times before she looked up.
I told you not to tell him.
He can help.
I can help.
Go home, Joey.
Deirdre asked me if Shannon could stay with me until they figured out the next step, but Shannon protested, saying she could take care of herself. Deirdre pulled me aside.
Do you have any money?
So you two can run away together?
Yeah.
We both looked to Shannon like 2 kids getting approval from their mother. She was standing over her suitcase with the eyeball in her hands. I had the most outrageous thought. If she just rubbed the eye on her skin, her mother would send down some signal to make the bruising fade and swelling subside.
I'll stay with you tonight.
She was looking at me. I hope Deirdre was disappointed. The 3 of us walked to my house, together holding hands. Shannon was in the middle, of course, and I made sure I was standing furthest from the traffic. When we got there, Shannon and Deirdre kissed while I stood by the front door, pretending not to watch. That night, Shannon and I made plans, the kind of plans kids make that are more hopeful than realistic. She'd stay hidden away in my room, and she'd get a job so she could save money to get a place of her own. We'd graduate, and I'd go to college to study marine biology. I suggested we get married, but Shannon said her mom's birth certificate trick probably wouldn't work on a judge. We talked into the night, legs and fingers intertwined, about how we met, about Deirdre's terrible haircut, about her mom who had gone back to their home planet. Shannon held up the glass eye.
She told me that she would use this to look after me, and one day, when I was ready, she'd use it to bring me home.
Where is home?
As far away from here as you can get.
Our words became distorted yawns, and I fell asleep with her breath on my face. I didn't panic the next morning when I found myself lying in bed alone. I think I would have been more surprised if Shannon had stayed. I held her parting gift, looking into the pupil, wondering if someday Shannon would use it to communicate with me. I called Deirdre to ask if Shannon was with her, but I knew that was futile. Wherever Shannon went, she didn't return. She and Deirdre had talked about Seattle, but I convinced myself that she had used the eye to return home and join her mother. It zapped her away to safety, to a place where a platypus didn't have to explain what she was.
Platypus stars Aryeh Krause-Nadler as the narrator, Logan Broadway as Joey, Kyra Leigh as Shannon, Ryan Goffman as Arnie, and Rachel Leon as Deirdre. Our theme music was composed by Trevor Tremaine. Cover art by Geneva Hicks. Shamarky Purcell performs our epigraph. Additional sound effects courtesy of Pixabay. This episode was written and directed by Michael Mao. Special thanks to Annie Weaver for helping make this podcast possible. To find out more about our cast, to read the original short story, or to donate to the show so we can make an unforgettable second season, visit us at ablindplaypodcast.com. or on Instagram at Mauhouse Productions. Hi, this is Michael Mao. Each week, I want to direct our listeners to another great podcast. Today's podcast holds a special place in my heart as it was created by a good friend of mine, award-winning sci-fi writer J. Barton Mitchell. Fathom immerses listeners not just into a dynamic story, but into the depths of the ocean, where a team of scientists employed by the galaxy's most powerful corporation, Mos Dorian, study a massive alien vessel called the Vault. But some mysteries should remain buried, and some doors should never be opened. Season 1 is out now, and Season 2, Derelict, is on the way. Find Fathom where you found A Blind Play of Social Forces. If you like it, toss us a Venmo tip at A Blind Play Podcast. We'll put it to good use producing our second season. If you aren't already, please follow the show. Your podcast app should have a follow button. Click it. And please rate and review. Ratings and reviews are the lifeblood of podcasts, and they take so little time. Just click those 5 stars. Tell us about your favorite episode. Share with friends and family. And thank you for listening.